Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are not going to be talking about music. We're going to be talking about something a little bit more important than that. So, unless, you know, you don't know how accents work and you can't hear my voice, I think you can tell that I am from the United Kingdom. So, and unless you are living under a rock, I think you know that the United Kingdom held a general election on Thursday the 4th of July, which is Thursday when I'm recording this. So today I'm just going to be talking about what happened in the election, how the election panned out, and then, we're going to be talking about some more local things, such as my constituency, how that panned out, and my opinion on, who won, what do I think of that, yeah. 1 second. I had to fix my hair because it was a mess. So, yeah. And so, yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So, first of all, how does the UK political system work? So, the UK is split into 650 constituencies, which are areas in which people vote for a member of parliament or an MP who belongs to a political party or is an independent, which means that they are, not of a political party. They are unaffiliated with a political party. And people vote, and whoever gets the most amount of votes in that constituency becomes the member of parliament, and that counts up to seats. And throughout the UK, the votes get announced throughout the night of the. It's most of elections, I think. I'm pretty sure every election, but most elections get held on Thursday. So, in this case, throughout the Thursday night and into the Friday morning, the seats get announced. In fact, yeah, and that's what happened this time. And whoever has the most seats becomes the main political party, and whoever is leader of that political party becomes the Prime Minister. Now, in the UK, we have 650 constituencies, so if you do some math, you need at least 326 seats to get a majority. The largest majority was it was a technicality in World War II, all seats apart from Sinn Féin's, because they were doing some sort of like protest thing, absent from, they were on some sort of strike to do with the government, so every single seat apart from that joined to form a mega coalition in government. So, but from a single party, the biggest majority in recent history at least was Tony Blair's 1997 victory for Labour, and in 2001 he only lost a few seats apart from that. So, yeah, there you go. And yeah, so um so this time round, this is being a mess, but I don't care. I'm just sharing my thoughts here. So this system is called first past the post, and it's a very outdated system, which we'll get into the reasons why of that later on. So, bit of backstory. So, in 2010, the Conservative government was voted in. David Cameron was their leader, and he did win an election. No, he did win the election, but he did not win a majority. Basically, the Lib Dems, who is this election they've posed themselves as further left than Labour, but traditionally they were a more centrist option to Labour, and they basically ate out the votes from, oh, that sounded really bad. They basically ate at the vote from the left and the right, which meant mostly the right, which meant that the Conservatives nor Labour could get a majority in the British government. So they had to form a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. Now, the Liberal Democrats' audience was slightly different from the Conservatives' audience. So this basically, because the Conservatives forced them to make decisions that they didn't really want to make, and it has cursed them even today. So, you have Conservatives, which is the main right-wing party, Labour, which is the main left-wing party, the Liberal Democrats, which are a centre-left party, the Greens, which are an environmentalist party. Then you have, in this election, Reform UK, which is a far-right party. It's sort of a successor to the UK Independence Party, or UKIP, which is got their most success in 2015. And then you've got single issue. Then you've got the Greens. I think I mentioned those, environmentalist party. Then you've got nationalist parties. In Wales, you have Plaid Cymru, which seeks to gain independence for Wales. The SNP, or the Scottish Nationalist Party, which seeks to get independence for Scotland. And then you've got, in Northern Ireland, you've got two parties, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Sinn Féin, which do not seek to get independence for Northern Ireland, but seek to get unionisation between Northern Ireland and Ireland. But yeah, in 2010, and the Lib Dems got about 50-something seats in the 2010 election. In 2015, David Cameron won a majority outright, so he didn't need the Liberal Democrats. But even then, the Liberal Democrats dropped from, it was 50-something seats to, I think it was 12 seats, I think, about. And David Cameron agreed in his manifesto to appease to the right to try and get a majority that he would call an election to test the membership of the UK in the European Union. And this would happen in 2016, the Brexit election. So, I'm pretty sure all of you know, the UK decided to leave the EU with a percentage of 52% to 48%. And basically we only left the EU because Boris Johnson put lies on the side of a bus. It's what a lot of leftists like to say because, it's basically what happened. He said, oh, we fund this much money to be in the EU. We didn't. Let's fund it in the NHS. He didn't do that. Vote leave. And people believed it and they voted leave. So, after that, basically, David Cameron ran off and hid. He resigned after basically saying, because basically he was a Remainer, he voted Remain, but he was just being a bit of a grifter, so he resigned when the UK voted to leave because that's not what he wanted. So Theresa May took over. Now, in the next year, in 2017, what she did was the Tories were about 20 points ahead of Labour in the polls. So she said to strengthen the majority of the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party only had a majority of about 6 seats, I think it was. So she was like, I'm going to call an election so I can get more seats, so I can make decisions better. So because, in your party, most of your MPs will vote the way you want to, but there will be a collection of MPs that will not. So the stronger the majority, the more likely you are going to have to pass a law. Because remember, you need 326 votes for to pass. So, there you go. And in the election campaign, the Tories were slipping and Labour went up. And to the election, Conservatives got 42% and Labour got 40%. This is probably the closest election we've ever had in British history, and it's probably the only election that we've had since probably about 10 years, maybe even 20 years, where it's actually been a two-horse race. The Lib Dems were off the map, UKIP were off the map, and the SNP, they were just in Scotland doing their own thing. Doesn't really matter. But this is the weird thing, because this will come in handy later. Though the Tories increased their vote share, they got about 37% in the previous election, they lost seat, their majority. Thankfully for the Conservatives, they only got it to about 8 seats short of a majority, so they formed a coalition with the DUP, which is a right-wing party in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has its own political scene. They don't have the parties in the UK. So they went on, and then basically Theresa May failed. So she resigned, and she was like, right, that's it, I'm done. And it was a decision that she really did not want to make. You can look at her speech of her resigning. She was getting quite emotional towards the end. It was a decision that she really did not want to make. Then Boris Johnson took over. Ugh. And basically, Boris, he was kicking a bunch of people out of his party, so they didn't get a majority, so it was kind of like a lame duck. So in 2019, he called an election. Now, he basically stood on the platform to get Brexit done, because in 2016, the EU decided to leave the UK, but they had never left. They were still trying to negotiate deals. So Boris Johnson, who was a leaver, or a Brexiteer, decided to get Brexit done, and he won a majority, a massive majority. He won about 40 excess seats than he needed to. That's a big majority. But, well, not as big as Tony Blair's, not as big as the new government, but big. And he did leave the EU shortly before lockdown happened, actually. And Boris Johnson's campaign was actually fairly good. He had a fairly good approval rating. That was until 2022. In 2022, scandals came out that Boris Johnson had been holding multiple parties during lockdown while he was ordering people to stay inside, and this was heavily condemned, and this caused him in the end to resign, and he would become Prime Minister while a leadership election would be held to decide the new Prime Minister. Multiple candidates stood, including Suella Braverman, previous Home Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, who is current favourites to overtake Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party, Penny Mordaunt, who recently lost her seat in the last election, Tom Tugendhat, former Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt, Rishi Sunak, former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, also former Prime Minister, and I can never remember his name, but co-founder of the polling company YouGov. I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting somebody here, but that's all I can remember. And it whittled down to Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss won. So Liz Truss became Prime Minister of the UK, and she basically made an absolute mess of it. It ended up with her becoming the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history, her only serving 44 days, because she resigned on her 41st day, but she served for an extra 5 days while a short leadership election was called. She messed up the economy, and ever since the Boris Johnson scandals, the Tories have been behind in the polls ever since. They have not overtaken Labour at a single point since then. So yeah, that's Boris Johnson's scandals. And then during Liz Truss, because this is when I was really engaged into politics, Labour were consistently about 30 points ahead of the Tories, and at one point it was very shortly before Liz Truss resigned, or actually like the day of it was basically polls that Labour would get about 500 seats in the next election, and the Tories would literally get 0. I know. I don't know what that was. It's like Mary Cooper from Young Sheldon with her eyes popping out of her head. She does it all the time. Watch Young Sheldon and you'll figure out she goes like all the time, and it's like her eyes popping out of her head. Anyways. And then Rishi Sunak managed to shrink it to about 20 points, but still it was absolutely horrendous. Then it got worse. Sunak was not a popular Prime Minister. He did some very bad decisions, but what would happen is Reform UK. So if you do not know what Reform UK is, originally the Brexit Party, it was founded in 2019 by former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, and basically the man who made Brexit happen, Nigel Farage, and he formed the Brexit Party, but he left it and renamed it Reform UK. And there was another leader, but in 2024, Nigel Farage announced that he would be standing as an MP he would be standing for an MP in Clacton, and he would become leader of Reform UK again. That drove Reform UK up into the polls, and basically until election day, the polls had Nigel right up Rishi's neck. In one poll, in fact, Reform UK were ahead of the Tories in the polls. And then you've got the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems were starting to recover from their 2015 slump. They had won 8 seats in the previous election. 8. And yeah, they were going to, and in some polls, the Lib Dems were actually projected to be leader of to be the opposition. But election day came, but yeah, this is leading up to now, and so this is what happened. Labour got about 34% of the vote, which is tiny. That is, even though he got about 1% more of the vote share than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019, he got about 1 million less votes. Rishi Sunak got about 24, so about 10 points behind. Reform UK got about, I think it was about 15-16% of the vote. Lib Dems got 12% of the vote. And yeah, this is how the seats came out. Labour got 411 seats, aka 62% of the vote. That's about double the vote share. The Tories got about... Oh wait, I haven't discussed the exit poll. So yeah. The exit poll. So the exit poll is a poll that is carried out the day of the election, and it uses a very wide margin of people, and it calculates how many seats people get. It is not an exact number, but it is an educated guess. And the exit poll came out. Labour were projected to win 410 seats. Conservatives were projected to win 131. The Lib Dems, 61. The SNP, it was 10. Reform UK, 13. Plaid Cymru, 4. The Greens, 2. And then the others would get the rest. And the exit poll was fairly accurate. It wasn't very accurate, but it was fairly accurate. And as the results came out, Labour had won a landslide. They won 411 seats, which is one more than the exit poll had projected, and they would have gotten 410 if a seat hadn't been recounted in Scotland. Because basically the morning of the election, the day of the election, there were still 2 seats that needed to be counted. One of them went to Reform, and one of them went to Labour. So, there you go. The Tories got 119, 120 seats, which was slightly less than expected, but not bad compared to what they were expected. It was only about 10 seats, which isn't much compared to how much the other seats, other parties were suspected to get. The Liberal Democrats were expected to get 61. They got 71. They basically nicked the 10 seats that the Tories were not that were expected to get, but they didn't get. The Lib Dems got 71 seats. Then Reform UK were expected again to get 13. They only got 4, which so they were pretty much all in the south of England. Nigel Farage notably won his seat in Clacton, so he is now a member of Parliament. And 3 other seats just in the south of England. And then the Greens, they were expecting to get 2. Now, because, it's so little seats, So ever since 2010, and I think before that, an MP called Caroline Lucas held on to a seat in Brighton Pavilion. And it was pretty much, it was the safest Green seat in the country. And by that, I mean it was the only Green seat in the country. But in 2024, Caroline Lucas announced that she would not be participating in the 2024 election. But they replaced her and they kept onto the seat. It's a pretty safe Green seat. But they were also expected to gain a seat from Labour's Llangwm Debonair in a pro-Palestinian choice in Bristol. And they did that. But they also gained 2 seats from the Conservatives. They gained Hereford North and Waynavy Valley, which are both in the south of England. And Plaid Cymru were expected to get 4. They got 4, including my constituency, which we'll, again, get on to later. And then the SNP got 9 seats, which was 1 less than what they were expected to. Then I'm holding a roll of bog roll. Don't know why I am, but I just am. So yeah. But yeah. So now we're going to discuss the results. Oh yeah, and in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin kept their results the same, but it was actually a very similar picture to in the rest of the UK. Labour and Sinn Féin's votes kept the same, but their oppositions split, and it caused them to be the leading party. Although the way that it happened for Labour is they had a massive uproar in seats. They doubled their seats, but in Sinn Féin they kept their seats the same. They had 7 in the last election. They kept 7. I'm pretty sure the DUP had 10 seats last election. They've been reduced to 5. The SDLP gained 2 seats. The Traditionalist Unionist Voice and the UUP, 2 of the DUP's contesters, won a seat each, and the Alliance Party also won a seat. So Sinn Féin is now head of the Parliamentary Party of Northern Ireland. So, yeah, there you go. And now we're going to talk about overrepresentation and underrepresentation. As it stands, Labour is now the only overrepresented party in Parliament. In last election, the Tories and the SNP were also the SNP was also overrepresented. Labour was underrepresented by about a percentage point, but not by much. This election, the Labour Party is overrepresented by about double. The Tories is underrepresented. I think they got about 13% of the seats. Well, not about 13%, but no, it was, yeah, actually, about 13%. Well, 12, 13, no. Oh, they actually got about 20% of the seats, roughly. But they got 24% of the vote. The SNP got 2% of the vote, but only 1% of the seats. The Lib Dems got 12% of the vote, but 11% of the seats. Again, underrepresented only slightly. Reform got about 15% of the vote, less than 1% of the seats. The Greens got 7% of the vote, yet less than 1% of the seats. And yeah, it was the same for pretty much all the parties. They all, got very underrepresented. Now this is a cause for electoral reform. Already, Reform UK and Liberal Democrats had electoral reform in their manifestos. Same with the Greens, because they are probably the most screwed over by first past the post. So, of course, they are campaigning for it. So, there you go. And I think the best way to describe this election is it was a multi-party system forced into a two-party election system. That's the best way to put it. But yeah, electoral reform. And this is probably never going to happen because, this vote-to-seat ratio for Labour was 1 to 1.5. So for every percentage of the vote, they got 1.85 seats, percentage of the seats. So, there you go. So, yeah. And this is definitely going to be a cause for electoral reform. Now, the next election, it really depends how Labour does. It's not even destined by whatever happens. It's really up in arms. I know it's quite early to tell, but it's really up in arms. I really do think that this election is the start of Britain's transformation from a two-party plus system to a multi-party system, like in Europe. many other countries in Europe, and I think we're going to see a lot more coalitions than we have in the past. So, yeah. Now, we're going to look at what happened in my constituency. So, my constituency is actually this election was a new one. It's basically taken from two constituencies, West Carmarthen and South Pembroke, and East Carmarthen and Dynevor, just to form Carmarthen. Basically, if you want to know why that happened, Tories wanted a gerrymander. So what they did is, the political climate in Wales is that the Tories are not very popular. They got about 12 seats in the last election. 1 second. And that's probably the most they've ever gotten in Wales. And it's mostly in North to Mid Wales. But South Wales, especially Southeast Wales, where most of the constituencies are, they vote Labour. It's one of the strongest Labour. It's one of the strongest Labour areas in the country. Breaking the, how breaking the red wall the Tories were trying to do the last election. You need a magic spell to break that red wall. Genuinely, there is no way that they are voting anything but Labour. They will vote Labour until the day that they die. My area of the country, it is pretty Plaid. Plaid only got 2 seats in Parliament last election. It was my constituency, and no, it was Ceredigion and Meirionnydd. Mine was Tories, but that's because of the constituency merger. It was originally Plaid with the Tories in second. Okay, so basically, what they did was they reduced Wales's seats in Parliament from 40 to 32. And it's a coincidence how the areas that mainly vote Conservative in Wales were in touch with the areas that mainly vote Labour and Plaid Cymru were. So yeah, in this election, we had 3 main contenders. You had the Plaid Cymru candidate, who is this woman called Anne Davies, the Labour candidate, whose name is Martha Angharad O'Neill, and the Tory candidate, who I don't know the name of. I think his name was Simon Hart. I know the Reform candidate's name was Bernard Holton. Bernard, yeah. So, yes, Simon Hart it was, Simon Hart. So, basically, the 2 main people who were doing a lot of campaigning were Reform and Labour. Reform was doing a lot of reform, like they were trying to do in a lot of elections these days, in this election, was trying to steal the Conservative voter base. So my area is very agricultural, so they were trying to appeal to a lot of farmers, and they were trying to, try and get their votes. It didn't work out as well as they probably hoped to. They got 15% of the vote. That's 11% more than they got previously. So they got like 4% in the last election. So but yeah, it basically split the Conservative vote. If Reform UK hadn't have been as big, they would have come in second place. Martha Angharad O'Neill, she did a lot of campaigning. Like the day the campaign started, TV adverts came rolling in. We've had TV adverts from her and also Keir Starmer for weeks. My name is Martha Ngharad O'Neill, and I am standing to be your Welsh Labour MP in Caerfyrddin. I have seen firsthand what we need here. A fresh start with Labour. Literally, on election day on July the 4th, you will have two choices. Change with Labour or chaos with the Tories. Literally, I practically, they are singed into my brain. And then Anne Davis, like, I genuinely knew absolutely nothing about it. I researched a little bit about her today. She was a counsellor, she's a farmer. She owns a nursery. But, like, she has been doing absolutely nothing. The plight election for my constituency has been kind of pathetic. They've just kind of assumed that they're gonna win. That because, they would have won if it wasn't for the Tories' strong showing in the last election, and because the Tories are doing so bad this election, they've just assumed they were going to win. Yes, that assumption was right. Plaid Cymru did keep the seat, but still, it's kind of a risky move just to assume that you've won it. There were three. I've already mentioned the four main parties. Plaid Cymru, Labour, Conservatives and Reform UK, but there were four other candidates. Four other candidates standing in this election, and in order of votes from most to least, there was Nick Bennett for the Liberal Democrats, Will Beasley for the Greens, Nancy Cole for Women's Equality Party, and David Evans for the Workers' Party of Britain. So, to recap the votes, Workers' Party of Britain, David Evans, 216 votes. Women's Equality Party, Nancy Cole, 282 votes. Greens, Will Beasley, 1,371 votes. The Liberal Democrats, Nick Bennett, 1,461. I actually got quite a few leaflets in the mail for him. Bernard Holton, Reform UK, 6,944 votes. The Conservatives, Simon Hart, 8,825 votes. Labour, Martha Ngharad O'Neill, 10,985 votes. Plaid Cymru, Anne Davis, 15,520 votes. So it was actually not a very strong majority. It was only 34% of the vote. So, but yeah, Anne Davis has won as MP in Caerfyrddin. So, they basically, both my parents voted for Plaid. Well, stepdad and my mum did. I basically had to drag her down to the polling station at like 7:30 on the Thursday night and said, "You will vote!" That's kind of dramatic reenactment, but yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened in my constituency. Um, you know, I think this election, more than ever, really shown electoral reform. Is the last election in the UK where I am not able to vote when I'm alive, at least. The next election, well, unless Labour calls it really early, the next election will be in 2029. I will be able to vote then, because, I am 15 months, basically. So, like, yeah, so 15 and but usually the elections are held in May, so 14 in 2024, 15 in 2025, 16 in 2026, 17 in 2027, and 18 in 2028. So if he calls it before, if Keir Starmer calls it before 2028, I won't be able to vote. But if he calls it as scheduled, which will be in July of 2029, I will be able to vote. And yeah, so yeah, there you go. And to be honest, if proportional representation is enacted, I will most likely be voting for Liberal Democrats because I want to see them in Parliament, or Plaid Cymru as well. It depends how you know, how their manifestos are next election. So, yeah, there you go. And yeah, that's my talk on the election. We'll be sharing some thoughts later on about about how Keir Starmer has done, maybe first 100 days, first year, basically in December, how he's done in Parliament. Yeah, so yeah, that's it from me. Bye.